Hello, my name is Affarirs from Edukea Company. So welcome today to proceed with our topic, which is the new topic and the last topic in Form 4, which is Africa in International Affairs. So we are going to look the new topic and the last topic in Form 4, which is called Africa in International Affairs. And our topic will be based on three parties or three areas where we will look on Africa in continental cooperation, and the second one is the Africa in regional cooperation, and the third one or the last one, it is Africa in international affairs or international cooperation. So we are going to start with the first area, which is continental cooperation. Before looking at that, let us get a little bit explanation about the Africa in international affairs. It means that Africa in international affairs is largely concerned with the relationship and the cooperation between African nations among themselves and the cooperation between Africa and the outside world. It means that the Africa in international affairs we largely concerned with the cooperation, the relationship between African nations themselves and the cooperation between African countries with the external world or outside world, means outside Africa, outside of Africa. So this is we call Africa in international affairs. It means that, as I have told you, that we are going to start with the first part, which is continental cooperation or Africa in continental cooperation. It means we are going to see African nations in their cooperation. So we are going to see the cooperation between African nations themselves. So continental cooperation was facilitated by social, political, and economic exploitation imposed in Africa. It means that continental cooperation was facilitated by social, political, and economic exploitation imposed in Africa. It means that the continental cooperation to be occurred or to exist was mostly facilitated by the social, political, and economic exploitation that was imposed by the colonialists in Africa. So they come up with continental cooperation in order to remove those all forms of exploitation that were imposed by the colonialists. It means that through the African people realized, it means that most African countries tried as much as they could in order to ensure that the legacy which have been brought by the colonialists must be removed and eliminated. And how it will be eliminated? It is through the continental cooperation or unit or cooperation among the African countries themselves to remove those all forms of exploitation that was imposed by the colonialists or by the foreigners. To me, through this, the African people realized the need for cooperation and the consciousness that they share a common destiny. It means that through this exploitation or forms of exploitation, the African people realized or come up to know that they need the cooperation in order to come up with the consciousness that will aim to attain the common destiny or to achieve the common destiny among themselves. So the continental cooperation can be traced back on the Pan-Africanism movement or PAM, which refer to the unity of all people of African origin. It means that the continental cooperation, it means that the African nation cooperation can be traced back on the previous movement that was called the Pan-Africanism movement. Pan-Africanism movement that was originated specifically in America whereby various black people in America were struggling and fighting, as well as they cooperated together as Africans or black Africans there in the New World or America in order to fight the exploitation and the other injustices which were done by the Europeans to the Africans or to the black people. It means that Pan-Africanism movement refers to the unity of all people of African origin or descent. It means that the Pani, it means all together, and Africanism means people of Africa or Africans or people of Africa, and the movement means fighting or cooperation to fight against the existing forms of exploitation or undesirable issues. So you can see that was the unity of all people of African origin in different parts of the world. So that's why we trace the continental cooperation back on the Pan-Africanism movement, because this was the movement or cooperation among the African people with origin in order to fight against the undesirable matters or issues that were imposed to the Africans or that were denied towards the Africans. After looking the short explanation about the continental cooperation, as we saw that the many African countries come to cooperate in eliminating or in fighting against the exploitation or forms of exploitation that was imposed by the colonialists or foreign people or foreign domination. So let us see the objectives of continental cooperation. What was the main objectives, or what were the main objectives of forming the continental cooperation? It means what was the aim of African countries to unite and to come up with the one cooperation to fight against those issues. The first objective was to preserve political independence and freedom. It means that various African cooperation or African continental cooperations was formed in order to preserve political independence and freedom that was lost to the colonialists. Means after the coming of colonialism in Africa, in African continent, the independence and the freedom of peoples of African people were lost and they were taken by the colonialists or by the foreigners. So the main aim of continental cooperation was to preserve political independence and the freedom. So after African countries to get their independence wanted to preserve, it means to preserve and to ensure that independence and the freedom is still all proceeding to prevail as time went on, generation to generation. So that was the objective number one. And the second one was to fight against the economic exploitation such as land alienation, poor wages, and the forced labor. It means that the continental cooperation was formed or existed in order to fight against the economic exploitation that was done by the foreigners or colonialists. For example, alienation, land alienation, it means that African lands were alienated from the native and taken by the colonialists, and the Africans remained landless. But another was poor wages. The African workers were paid lowly, or they were paid low wages that could not satisfy their needs. But also the forced labor. It means the Africans were forced to work on the colonialist projects like farms, plantations, mining centers, so like that. So the main or other objective of continental cooperation was to fight these all forms of economic exploitation, that is land alienation, poor wages, and forced labor. But another objective was to unite all people of African origin in the struggle against the political oppression. It means that The continental cooperation was aiming at to unite all people of African origin in the struggle against the political oppression. As I've told you that in the New World there were political oppression towards the Africans or African origin, people of African origin. It means their political rights were denied by the white people or by the Westerners in their country. So you can see that the Africans were not allowed to participate in political activities like to be voted and forming political parties to get the position in the government and other issues. So that their aims was to unite all people of African origin to struggle against that political oppression. But another one was to challenge the ideology of European supremacy, which undermines African political independence and economic stability. It means that the continental cooperation was aimed at challenging the ideology of European supremacy, whereby the European countries were dominating almost all over the world, these countries, specifically in Africa. So those African countries were aiming at challenging the ideology of European supremacy to ensure that the African countries are self-ruling themselves and the economic base is stable. So the African countries decided to cooperate together to come up with various strategies and policies that will make them to be self-independent and be economically stable, or to ensure there is economic stability in their country. That was another objective of continental cooperation among the African countries themselves. But another objective was to protect African dignity. It means that the objective of continental cooperation among the African countries was to protect African dignity. It means after the coming of colonialism in Africa and the Africans to be taken in other parts of the world, like in America, Europe, and the Caribbean, the African dignity were lost. So the aim of continental cooperation was to return or to restore the lost African dignity among the African people in their nations. But the last one, but not least, was to preserve African culture from destruction. As I've told you that after coming of the colonialists, they decided, or they ensured the African culture was distracted. So the Africans wanted to cooperate themselves all together in order to remove those destructive methods or destructive cultures which undermined the African culture. So the continental cooperation wanted to preserve African culture from European destructive methods, as Europeans come up with their Western cultures and introduced it in different parts of African continent, and the Africans adapted those Western culture. So the African countries decided to abandon those or Western culture and to preserve their own culture or traditional culture that were prevailing before the coming of whites in Africa. So these were the objectives of continental cooperation. So after looking at that, let us see that continental cooperation existed through formation of various organizations as shown below. It means that the continental cooperation among the African continent themselves, it means occurred or existed through the formation of different organizations. It means that the cooperation was not there as just blunt ideas. There were various organizations that were formed to represent or to present the cooperation or continental cooperation among the African countries. And we are going to see various organizations or continental organizations that will form between African countries or African nations after independence, even before independence. So let us see the first organization. It is the rise of Organization of African Unity, or AU. It means that was the first organization or continental organization formed in Africa among the African countries. It means that OAU, or Organization of African Unity, this was an organization of independent African states that was formed firstly by 30 countries in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia on 25th June 1963. It means that OAU was firstly formed with or by 30 independent states or countries in Africa that was formed in Ethiopia in Addis Ababa on the 25th June 1963, and the emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, was become the first chairman of that organization. So the 30 countries or African countries that attended that organization or joined that organization, but they elected or they chose only one chairman, that was Haile Selassie, Emperor of Ethiopia, to become the first chairman of that organization to represent the cooperation among the African countries. Before its formation, African countries attempted to unite Africa to fight against the problem that faced their people. It means that before the formation of Organization of African Unity, there was attempts of various efforts that was done in order to fight against the problems that were facing the African people. So you can see there were different efforts before the formation of OAU in 1963, whereby those efforts were aiming at bringing together the African countries to fight against the problems that were facing the African countries. And those efforts have been mentioned. We are going to see one after another. The efforts included the creation of Pathmaker, Pan-African Freedom Movement for East and Central Africa. It means the first effort that was done before the formation of Organization of African Union was Pathmaker. In long term is Pan-African Freedom Movement for East and Central Africa. It means was aiming at bringing together the East and Central African countries together in order to cooperate and fight against the problems that were facing the East and Central African countries and Africa at large. And that was formed, or it was conducted in the late of 1915s. So these were the first efforts. So we are proceeding with the efforts which was done before the formation of Organization of African Unity. So the second is the formation of Brazzaville Group in 1961 by Congo, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Ivory Coast, Niger, Senegal, Mahanet, Mauritius, Gabon, Chad, Burkina Faso, and the Upper Volta. So it means that another effort was the formation of Brazzaville Group that was formed in Congo in 1961 and included various African countries like Cameroon, Central African Republic, Ivory Coast or Cote d'Ivoire, Niger, Senegal, Mahnet, Mauritania or Mauritius, Gabon, Chad, Burkina Faso, and Upper Volta. So these were African countries that decided to come up together and to make the cooperation or continental cooperation on ensuring that they are fighting against the undesirable issue that were done by the foreigners in their countries, and to ensure that there is common market, there is good infrastructure, there is self-independence and freedom, and their dignity have been restored. So this was the second effort that was done before the formation of OAU in 1963. But another effort was the Charter of Union of African States, designed by Guinea and Ghana in 1958 for the purpose of bringing cooperation among them. It means that another effort was the Charter of Union of African States between Guinea and Ghana, and it was formed or was designed in 1958 for the purpose of bringing cooperation among them. It means that these two countries, Ghana and Guinea, were aiming at to ensure there is cooperation in various activities. Like in economic matters, Guinea and Ghana were supposedly to cooperate, whereby the economies of both countries must be developed or must be increasing in ensuring the production of agricultural sector, in mining sector, even in other like fishing and other activities that will improve or revamp the economy of their countries, but also in ensuring there is common market for the products which are produced in those both two countries, Guinea and Ghana. So they come up with the cooperation in a common market, or having common market where they will sell their products. Even in assistance in infrastructure, like having the roads, railway, and the airports that will be cooperating in making daily activities, like the transportation activities between the two countries, or thus the member states, Guinea and Ghana. So this was the third effort that was done in before 1963 of formation of OAU, or Organization of African Union. But the fourth effort was formation of military command and the African Common Market at Casablanca, Morocco, by the head of states such as Mali, Ghana, Algeria, and Morocco itself. It means that another effort which was formed was military command or military command that was involved in the African. It means that the formation of military command and the African Common Market mean that there are two efforts that was done to cooperate in military matters and the common market, or to have common market, and that formation or that union or cooperation was done under the member states of respective countries, and that cooperation was done at Casablanca in Morocco. So the various countries in African continent, like head of state of Mali, Ghana, Algeria, and Morocco itself were participated to form that cooperation that will ensure there is cooperation in military assistance when the member states is invaded by the foreign or by the enemies, and in a common market it means that having or sharing the market in selling their goods, and if it's just export or import in the country or the member states. So they were cooperating in such a way, and that was another evidence that there was efforts before the formation of OAU to bring the cooperation among the African states in the African continent. But these were only four remarkable efforts that was done before the formation of Organization of African Unity in 1963 in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. So by 1963, African countries realized that there was a need of Pan-African organization to bring more strength, unity, and the development among all countries, hence formation of Organization of African Unity. It means that by the 1963, the most African countries come to realize that there is a need, as we African states, to form or to come up with the Pan-African organization. It means the formation of the organization that will join or that will bring together the African countries or African people with origin together in order to bring more strength, unity, and development strategies among all countries found in African continent. And that's why led to the formation of OAU, and I've told you that the formation of OAU started with the 30 member states or 30 countries in Africa. So, and later the other countries that were getting their independence were joined the organization. So these were the efforts. Let us see the problems that faced the OAU, which means that after the formation of Organization of African Union, there were some problems which were facing the organization in its implementation of policies and the strategy that were suggested during the formation of that organization. The first one was assassination of head of states in many countries. It means that there was the massacring of head of states in many African countries after the formation of Organization of African Union, African Unity, whereby those head of the states were killed or were assassinated in order to weaken the organization, because if the member states or the leader or the head of the states is being assassinated, that state or that country will no longer be the member of that organization, because they will know having the leader who will represent them in the organization. So we can see the example of the assassinated leader, who was Melchior Ndadaye of Burundi in 1993. It means that this was the leader of the member state, the head of the state in Burundi, and in 1993 was assassinated in order to weaken the organization. And not only that, but there were other head of the states who were assassinated. So in order to weaken the cooperation among the continent of African states. But the other problem was absence of good infrastructure. It means that in many African countries there were presence of poor infrastructures, which was not supportive in ensuring there is abundant and sufficient transportation systems or communication among the head of the states and their member states in order to come up together and discuss about various issues and the policies as well as strategies concerning with the organization on how they will come up or suggest with the new ideas and the policies that will be used to ensure that there is good communication and the facilities for the daily communication among the head of the state to ensure the organization is growing up and improving the achievements. Another was shortage of finance. It means that the organization to be run or to be staffed, to be managed, there must be enough finance or financial financial assistance that will assist that organization to be running or to be managed by the head of the states. So there are people who are supposed to be paid due to the jobs or works which they had in the organization. So the lack of finance or money that could facilitate the payment of those workers within the organization made the organization of African unit to be weakened, and that's facing the problem of such way. Another was civil wars in member states. It means that in member states that was formed the OAU were experiencing the civil wars, like in Somalia, Sudan, Rwanda, Congo, and other countries like Nigeria and the other African member states that was formed the OAU. So the presence of civil wars on those member states could not bring the effective participation in various activities that were going on the organization. So the head of the states were involving themselves on how they will handle the situation of civil wars, and to ensure that the civil wars end up. So that was another problem. But the last one was interference by external powers. To mean that the OAU was interfered by the external powers like USA or United States of America, Britain, France, and other capitalist countries, whereby some member states of OAU were socialists, so and others were capitalists. So they decided to interfere in order to weaken that organization and to ensure that all countries or African countries are following the capitalist system or capitalist ideology. So that was another problem facing the OAU. Until there, this is that was the problems that was facing the OAU. I would like to give you an exercise or question which you have to ask yourself or you have to perform, and that is explain the objectives. Explain the objectives of OAU. Sorry, not OAU. Explain the objectives of continental cooperation. So this is our exercise which you have supposedly to perform after the end of the lesson. So I would like to thank you for being with me together until the end of the lesson. I wish you the good time and I welcome you in the next session. Have a good day. Bye bye.
Purchase your tracks today.